We all know that we cannot be prosperous, we cannot be abundant, we cannot create the life that we deeply desire when we don't feel worthy and we don't feel deserving of it. And so I think that that's, the biggest piece of this element being out of balance that leads to us not being able to fully step into our infinite potential.
This is Leah Steele. Welcome to the Wealth Witch podcast. Just a few years ago, I experienced complete financial collapse. We lost a business, our home, and a car. My husband was selling plasma to pay for diapers and formula. I was living a life I hated, and I was miserable. It was the lowest part of my life. It ended up being my biggest blessing. Just a few short years later, I've designed the life of my dreams. I live a life of luxury in beautiful Bali, Indonesia, travel the world, and spend my days helping others manifest wealth and abundance. Living a purpose-led life changed everything for me. This podcast is about my journey, my top tips and tools for manifestation, and interviews with all the amazing, world-changing, inspiring people I meet along the way. Welcome to my world.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Wealth Witch podcast. I am your host, Leah Steele, and I am so excited to be bringing you a very special 5-part podcast series. It's something that's so near and dear to my heart, and if you've been following me for a while in my journey, you know how passionate I am about 5-element theory. And so I've decided to do a podcast series for you guys that's all about wealth consciousness as it relates to the 5 elements. So 5-element theory has been this incredible journey that I have been on for the last several years. It is an integral part of my self-mastery journey. I live according to my constitutional factor, which is really our elemental superpower that each and every one of us has. And it's a big part of the offerings that I do in the Immortal Alchemy side of my business. So I've got 2 sides of my business. One is, my wealth alchemy programs, and the Wealth Witch podcast sort of falls into that vein. And then I also have my Immortal Alchemy programs, which are all about self-mastery of physical, psychological, spiritual, mental, emotional beingness. And it's something that I'm so, so passionate about. And so I was looking at how do these 2 things intersect? And obviously, you know that I feel that being wealthy means being well and healthy in all areas of your life. And everything on planet Earth is made up of elements. We are made up of all of the elements. And so I wanted to really take a deep dive with you into 5-element theory and talk to you about how each element interacts with wealth consciousness work and our ability to manifest money, wealth, abundance, and prosperity in our lives. And so today is going to be the first of this 5-part series. And today we're going to be talking about the fire element. So sit back, enjoy the ride, and hopefully you will get just as inspired as I am by all of this incredible elemental wisdom and knowledge. And hopefully it will really help you look at where you might be getting in your own way when it comes to manifestation. So the fire element is associated with the season of summer. And the primary emotion of the fire element is joy. And the color associated with the fire element is red or lack of. So people who are primarily fire element people, who have a fire element constitutional factor, have sometimes really red faces, or they have a complete lack of any color in their face if they're on the other extreme of imbalance. The sound of the fire element is laughing. It is very joyful, and it is this incredible vehicle for clear thought and consciousness. So when your fire element is in balance, you have really clear thought and consciousness. The chakras associated with the fire element are the crown chakra and the heart chakra. So really those places where we trust our love for ourselves and for others, and we trust God, source, universe, all that is. And so when your fire element is in balance, you have appropriate awareness around people's character and appropriate degrees of emotional closeness to people. And so how does that play a role when it comes to like money, wealth, and abundance? Well, you know who to trust in your investments and money dealings. You know how much information to give people just in all areas of life, but particularly with what we're talking about today in relation to your own personal prosperity, money, and abundance. And you also know who would make appropriate partners. So this is really impactful in your business dealings to have an imbalance fire element. When fire element is out of balance, it has extreme emotional volatility. It has issues with closeness and intimacy. It has issues with happiness, and it has massive issues with clarity and confusion. And so, what is so common that we feel when we've got issues around money? Well, anxiety and sometimes mania and misery, right? Because when we are in lack and scarcity mentality or mindset, we feel anxious. We feel misery. We feel miserable. We feel out of control. We feel confused. And when your fire element is out of balance, it's really, really difficult to bring those things back into balance. So there's a lot of that operating from the midbrain, from the fight, flight, freeze, instead of being able to be fully present in each and every situation that you come across in your life. So often when fire element is out of balance, we see people doing that fake it till you make it mentality that I am just so not a fan of. Like, I really truly believe that you should never do fake it till you make it, because you're really just setting yourself up for continuing to be in a place where you're not in alignment with personal integrity. So you also see people with fire imbalance pretending everything's okay when it's not. And I think, lots of us saw this in our parents. Like, this is programming and conditioning, right? It's like, hide it from your kids. Don't let your kids know when there's financial trouble. Pretend everything's okay, even when it's not. Don't let people see that you're in a vulnerable state around money or that things aren't going the way that you would like them to. It's like, put on the happy face, act like everything's okay. And when things aren't okay, be self-deprecating or be clowning about it, like make fun of it, have sarcasm about it. And so what ends up happening is we're really out of integrity with what's actually going on. We're not allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. And as a result of that, in many cases, we're actually repelling abundance, prosperity, and financial resource from coming to us because we're not in alignment and we're not in integrity. And so these really are traits of fire elemental imbalances, to just fake it till you make it, pretend like everything's okay. And when people happen to know that things aren't okay, make fun of it, right? So fire element imbalance, it creates massive issues with closeness and intimacy. And one of the things that I see so frequently in my practice is that money issues cause so many issues in relationships. And when we feel like we can't be forthright and we feel like we can't talk about money, which is another thing that we're completely programmed to do in relationships, it affects our closeness and our intimacy with our significant others, which then ultimately affects our overall happiness and the overall happiness of our family. And so when fire element is out of balance, it adds to and contributes to programming and conditioning that we already have around that stuff and can make things so much more difficult. So I'm going to give you just some physical pathology signs of what may be happening with you if you have a fire imbalance. And so these are just some simple diagnostics that you can use to determine if perhaps this is an area of your life that you need to look at getting back in balance. So physical pathology of fire element imbalance are heart palpitations, tiredness, shortness of breath, a stuffy feeling in the chest, spontaneous sweating, a pale face. So again, we talked about that earlier, but like complete lack of color in the face, lack of joy or inappropriate joy, cold hands and feet, because this element is associated with the heart and the heart circulates our blood through our body. Cold hands and feet can be physical pathology of a fire element imbalance, mania, and anxiety. So there is a spirit that is associated with each element. And the spirit of the fire element is the Shen spirit. And what the Shen spirit brings to us is clear thought and consciousness. And that is the real beauty of an imbalance fire element. But there's pathology to that 5 spirit, the Shen spirit being out of balance. And so some of that pathology, these would be more like sort of the psychological pathology or the spirit pathology associated with fire imbalance. And those are insomnia, dream disturbed sleep, anxiety, inability to concentrate, timidity, being overly talkative. Fire imbalance people talk all the time. They're always talking. They always have something to say. They probably have podcasts. But also schizophrenic mania, hyperactivity, and restlessness. So those are just some ways if you're like, wow, I've got a lot of that stuff, you may want to look at, do I have a fire imbalance? My business partner, Michelle Patrick, who's been on the podcast with me, and I have an incredible Facebook group called The Element Factor. And there are 6 plus hours of content in that Facebook group where you can learn more about imbalances and how to bring yourself back into balance. And it's really great foundational information on 5-element theory. So we'll put the link to the Facebook group in the description of the podcast, and you can definitely check that out and see what to do if you are identifying, as I'm going through this podcast series, that you've got one of these elemental imbalances. And the truth is, we're all made up of all of the elements. So at some level, we've got slight imbalances in all of them, right? And so for me, one of the things I love about 5-element theory is it just enables me to practice self-mastery so specifically because I can look at, okay, what element's out of balance? What's the reaction that I'm having? What do I need to do to shift that? And so again, for like information on how to correct that, definitely check out the Element Factor Facebook group, and you can get some more information on bringing the element back into balance in that group. So we talked a little bit about the issues that arise from having an out of balance fire element, but a lot of it's around worthiness and deserving. And we all know that we cannot be prosperous, we cannot be abundant, we cannot create the life that we deeply desire when we don't feel worthy and we don't feel deserving of it. And so I think that that's, the biggest piece of this element being out of balance that leads to us not being able to fully step into our infinite potential. And that not feeling worthy and not feeling deserving leads to us having difficulty exchanging appropriately love and warmth with other people. It leads to us being emotionally volatile. It creates issues of closeness and intimacy between us and our, the people that are really, really important to us in our lives. It makes it so that we're unhappy, we're confused, and we just don't have clarity. And when we don't have those things, it is damn near impossible for us to vision the things that we need to vision to call in that life that we deeply desire. When we are caught up in misery and lack of joy and we're feeling vulnerable and we self-isolate and we obsess over, why we're so unhappy, you can't be in creation mode. If that's how you're feeling, you can't be in creation mode and be cultivating a discipline and a practice and a devotion to yourself and be engaging in those types of behaviors. And so, I think that's one of the reasons why the fire element is so associated with the crown chakra, because it is obviously our connection to the divine, our connection to God, source, universe, that enables us to, and to our own divine immortal soul, that highest level version of ourselves that allows us to manifest, that allows us to create. I say all the time that we're the most powerful creators in our reality, but when we don't have that connection to higher self, it's really difficult to manifest and create in the 3D plane. Hey, I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Wealth Witch podcast. I wanted to take a quick break to talk to you about an amazing offer I have to work with me like my high-end clients do for a fraction of the investment. If there's anything that the last several months of chaos and change has showed us, it's that our perceptions of what is safe, stable, and secure is anything but. You are your guarantee. You are the key to unlocking and calling in the wealth that you desire. If you don't already know, I'm all about belief and intention, and for me, deciding is the most important action you can take. So I don't need to convince you. You'll either resonate with this or not. The only prerequisite that you need to have is a desire to change your current financial reality. This mastermind I'm about to tell you about is about empowering you to take back control of your financial destiny and take action towards creating the life that you deeply desire. The Wealth Alchemy Mastermind is hosted via the Telegram app, and I've set it up in a way that it's accessible. This is an incredible opportunity to work with me in this mastermind at a special pre-launch rate of $44 a month. Yes, you heard that right. Just $44 a month to work with me at the same level that some of my high-end clients do. So what do you get? Weekly exclusive content and training, a monthly Zoom coaching call, a monthly Q&A session, wealth paradigm downloads, wealth activations, and a mastermind chat full of like-minded community. You aren't doing this mastermind for the content. You're doing it for the transmissions, period. You will be activated with abundance just by being in this container. But you have to act fast. The pre-launch offer is only available for a limited time, so click the link in the description of the podcast and sign up now. I'd love for you to join me, so do the thing. Now back to the podcast. So I think I talked to you a little bit about some of the responses to the issues, but I want to go over these again because it doesn't always show up exactly the way you think it's going to, fire imbalance. So some of the responses are to be compulsively cheerful. We talked about that earlier, like act like everything's okay. One response is to just be miserable, right? And how many of us have felt that? We feel out of control when it comes to our money and our finances. We feel like there's no possible way that we can get back into control because we feel like money's controlling us, right? And it's just misery. We just feel miserable. We feel trapped. We feel like there's no way out. And so this is, at that very base level of dealing with worthiness and deserving, when it comes to manifestation, it's like getting through the lack and the scarcity, getting through the anxiety, getting through the misery. But one of the responses to fire element imbalance is also to be open and overly sociable. So it is that like wearing the mask, right? It's like pretend like everything's okay. Be cheerful. Don't isolate yourself. Get out into the world. Force yourself out into the world. And so there's always extremes in elemental imbalance. So on one side, people might be completely closed and isolated, but on the other side, they might be really overly open and sharing too much and overly sociable. So you might just want to identify, which one of those are you? And then the next time you're starting to behave like that, or you're seeing that you're struggling with love and warmth or closeness and intimacy, and you're not feeling connected to people, look at, is my fire element out of balance? How am I feeling? What can I do to bring this back into balance? Making light of sarcasm or clowning is definitely a response to a fire element imbalance that's causing issues in your life. And then just feeling vulnerable. And then that need to really protect ourselves, like to put those walls around our heart, to make sure that nobody can see in and protect ourselves. And then obviously it causes the emotional volatility, which we've talked about a lot. But on the other side of that, if one extreme is the emotional volatility, the other side can be a total flatness or a numbness. And so that's definitely something that you can feel. And I think that, I see a lot of people come in that are really wanting to shift their money story, and they've just got a numbness around it. They just have this, they're resigned, right? They're resigned to the fact that they're never going to be where they desire to be. And as a result of that, they're just not even putting energy towards desires. And they don't have that belief anymore that if they can conceive of it, they can achieve it, right? That if they can conceive of it, it's because they were meant to have it. And all of the programming and all of the conditioning and all of the control by the global financial elite and all of the continual putting ourselves in our places just causes us to be flat with, sometimes no emotional reaction because we've just numbed ourselves out because it's more comfortable to be numb than it is to be volatile. So that's definitely one extreme that I see quite a lot. So the worthiness and deserving comes into play, and it's like, what ultimately does that come down to? Well, it ultimately comes down to one of the 5 primary questions that are associated with the fire element, and that is, am I lovable? Right? So we don't feel worthy and we don't feel deserving of all the things that we deeply desire, but ultimately, why? Why don't we feel worthy? Why don't we feel deserving? Because we don't feel lovable. And that is a program, an age-old program that they have programmed and conditioned into us to keep us constantly questioning not only ourselves, but other people. So if I don't feel lovable and I'm questioning, am I lovable? That means that other people can't love me or other people don't love me. And so, or we're constantly questioning, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? So I don't know how many of you had parents that showed and expressed love through money or gifts, but a lot of us associate how much someone cares about us or how much someone loves us with the amount of money that they're willing to spend on us, or with the amount of sacrifice, financial sacrifice that they're willing to make for us, or the amount of financial support that they're able to give to us. And I want you to just know that, like, this is just a bunch of bullshit. Like, it's just a fucking program to keep us divided, right? Love has nothing to do with money. How much someone loves you has nothing to do with how able they are to financially support you or what they give you that's monetary. And even though we've been programmed to believe that, like, it's just really a time for us to shift out of that. Another one of the primary questions associated with the fire element is, why do I go up and down so much? And I think that this is so relevant when it comes to money, because so many of us, when we're in our journey with money and we're trying to sort out our money story and we're trying to sort out our money shit, it's like we have these high highs and we have these low lows. And it's like coming to that place of stability and trying to, like, really embrace fluidity, but not having to be on that roller coaster ride, that up and down, is, one of the first lessons that we really need to learn. And it is the dedication and devotion to our personal practices that stops us from being on that roller coaster ride, that really enables us to get off and be like, okay, now I'm going to create stability, safety, stability, and security in my life when it comes to my money, wealth, abundance, and prosperity, because that's what I desire, right? And I don't want to go up and down. I don't want to be on the hamster wheel anymore. I don't want to be on the roller coaster anymore. I want to be in a place of safety, stability, and security. And we get to create that, but we have to have the awareness of, one, I think, these elemental imbalances, but also we have to commit to ourselves, and we have to keep the commitments to ourselves to do the work that's required to shift our mindset, so that we can ask ourselves the appropriate questions and that we can stop ourselves from simply behaving in conditioned and programmed ways. So how can I truly relate to others is another primary question associated with the fire element. And this one, I think is really important as well, because we at some level associate how much money we make with the class that we're in, right? Are we lower class? Are we middle class? Are we upper class? And that directly determines how we feel we can relate with other people in other classes. And I say this all the time. I'm like, if you think that there's not a caste system in the world, even in our, superpower countries, even in our first world countries, you're sorely mistaken, because there is. And we all know that it's there, and we're all programmed to stay in our place. And some of us had parents that told us we could be anything that we wanted to be when we were growing up. And so we've been able to shift a class, or we're able to move up a class maybe, but that is not the norm. And so we do relate to others based upon our financial classes. And this feeling, right? Like for me, I was a kid who was middle class, lower to middle class growing up. And, my rich friends, I just was like, I didn't quite feel comfortable. I didn't quite feel like I could relate to them, right? And that shifted over time as I made my own money and as I began to elevate myself, and as I began to do my own wealth consciousness work and break down my limiting beliefs and my programming and my conditioning. Now, I don't feel that way anymore. Well, for the most part, I don't. But I will tell you that I do meet people still where I'm just like, holy shit, they have so much money. And it's like, I do have that little piece of myself that still is like, oh, what am I going to have to talk to them about? So I think it's just totally human nature. But again, it's important to recognize and realize that this is programming. It's conditioning. It has been put in place to keep us in control. It has been put in place to keep us disempowered. And so again, show up and do the work and deconstruct the programming and deconstruct the conditioning so that we don't have to be in these places of disempowerment anymore. So another question that is associated with the fire element, another primary question, is how can I find true happiness? So how many of us at one time in our life or another associated having money with being happy? There's that saying, money can't buy you happiness. And then there's the other school of people that say, well, those people didn't have any money. And so the thing that I'll tell you is I don't believe that money and happiness exist on the same pole. I believe that money gives you choices, and I believe that choices can create happiness. And so I think it's all connected. But when we make associations between money and happiness, that's a really dangerous thing, because how many people do we know that have so much money and are fucking miserable? So many, right? Because money doesn't bring you happiness. Money can create choices, and choices can bring you happiness. But that's only going to happen if you are mentally and emotionally and vibrationally in a state of happiness. Like, it's not the money that's going to create that. Because I definitely believe in the saying, more money, more problems, because that absolutely can be the case. So it's about getting yourself into energetic alignment and raising your energetic vibration to that state of happiness. And I do believe that when you do that, you are a magnet to money. So when you're looking at your own energetic vibration and you're raising your vibration and you're raising your level of consciousness and you're expanding your level of consciousness, I do believe that we're a magnet to money. So maybe I believe that happiness can bring money, but I don't know if money brings happiness. Well, I know money doesn't bring happiness, but I think happiness can for sure bring money. And then the last primary question associated with the fire element is, why can't I sort things out? And I mean, I know that we've all been through this where it's like, why can't I figure out this money thing? Well, you can't figure out this money thing because the global financial elite don't want you to figure out this money thing. They literally want you to be leveraged, in debt, uncomfortable, bouncing checks, paying late fees, having your interest rates raised. Like, when you are doing those things and when you are in the place where you're feeling like you can't sort things out, you are exactly where you are meant to be. You are being the most perfect compliant commodity that you can be. And so if you're doing that, if you're feeling that, like, why can't I sort things out? You actually are doing the very best that they want you to do. Like, you're acing it. You are amazing. You are winning at being a compliant commodity if you're feeling like you can't sort things out when it comes to money. There's nothing wrong with you. You're being exactly who you've been programmed and conditioned to believe. But the good news is that we can deconstruct that programming. We can deconstruct that conditioning. You don't need to be in that state. And you can absolutely get to a place where money doesn't control you anymore and you don't feel disempowered by it, and where you are absolutely feeling like, wow, I can always sort everything out. That is a reality that is available to you. So the fire element is associated with the organs of the heart. So we have the heart, we have the pericardium, the small intestine, and the triple burner. And like I told you before, it's also associated with the heart chakra and circulation. And so one of the things that I want to just leave you with is that I really truly believe that imbalanced fire element leads to imbalanced circulation of resources. And because the heart element really rules circulation, it gives us the ability to be able to circulate resources. So our time, our energy, our money, from a place of integrity. And that just adds to us being able to acquire and accumulate wealth. It adds to us having freedom of choice. And so that is just a little bit about the fire element and how it interacts with the wealth consciousness work that I do. I would love for you to join my Element Factor Facebook group. It's called The Element Factor on Facebook. We'll put the link down below again, and learn a little bit more about this if you're interested in it. But this is definitely the element of stability, safety, stability, and security, of receptivity. So being able to receive all of the blessings that the universe wants to bestow upon you, and letting down your walls and allowing people around you to support you in all ways. And then in turn, you being able to support them. So that's all for this time. I am super excited to come back and share the earth element associations when it comes to wealth consciousness work. Probably be alternating these about every other week. So there's 5 of them. And would love to hear your feedback and comments about how you felt about the episodes. Feel free to leave a review or to private message me on any of the socials. So until next time, remember, it is your divine birthright to be wealthy in all areas of your life. And you are so worthy and you are so deserving, which is what this fire element is all about. And that's all. Until next time, this is the Wealth Witch signing off.
That's a wrap. Thank you for joining me. Remember, wealth is a mindset, and you absolutely deserve to live the life you deeply desire. And with belief and intention, you create your reality. Until next time, this is Leah Steele, the Wealth Witch.